just had a question very specifically related to that point
Richard,
of 217 and 218. Sorry.
I always love hearing what Stephen has to say on these subjects.
217, 218 and how they would relate to the withdrawal agreement. So if we envisage a situation where we leave the European Union without a deal on the 31st of October, the legal basis for the relationship then goes to Article 207, 217 or 218. But the EU has made clear that the withdrawal agreement items have to be resolved before you can begin a negotiation on the new legal basis. Does that leave us in a kind of lacuna then? Because 207, 17 and 18 are not designed to deal with the kind of things that were negotiated under 50. What would if you envisage a position where the British Prime Minister then, let's say we leave without a deal, and for whatever reason the view is that we do need to try and get a better trade deal with the EU. The EU says, well, sorry, you have to resolve the issues that are under Article 50. What would be the legal basis then? Is there a way of copying and pasting the withdrawal agreement into a 217 or 218 legal basis? Is that possible? It's clearly unprecedented to mix those, mixing oil and water really. But it'd be very interesting to know what would happen if we were left in that legal vacuum.
Well, what we do know is that association agreements have to be agreed unanimously on the EU side. And usually they're mixed agreements, meaning that member states have to ratify them as well, although sometimes the EU either carves a bit out as an interim agreement or agrees to treaties coming into force provisionally. So that's another possibility to speed things up a little bit on the EU side. Now, if you try to simply copy the whole text of the withdrawal agreement, I think it would be bound, whatever form it takes legally, on the EU side, it would have to be a mixed agreement because it involves, even if it's just for a transition period, the free movement of people. And the Treaty Article 79 of the TFEU says that the numbers of non-EU citizens admitted to employment markets of member states is a national competence. So we already know that alone makes it a national competence. So would the continuation of the aviation relationship, for instance. That's also a mixed competence we know from the case law, probably several other things. But that alone, if we keep those things in place, makes it a mixed competence. Now, if you start taking things out, if you start taking out free movement of people, if you have a separate aviation treaty as the EU legislation on no deal in aviation says there should be, then it might be a little bit simpler. Of course, I expect we wouldn't be talking about exactly the same text of the withdrawal agreement. There would be some negotiation on some aspects of it that would be changed, might end up in separate treaties or not. But I think the simplest way forward is to call it an association agreement because of the fairly close relationship that's in it. And then, of course, the EU is also freer from the constraints which it perceives to have about Article 50 about negotiating a long-term relationship. Because, of course, the EU has always felt that it can't negotiate a long-term relationship under Article 50, even though, of course, the backstop in principle is unlimited. The text of the withdrawal agreement says, but in principle it's temporary, because of this perception you can't have a long-term relationship under Article 50. But, of course, you can as an association agreement. And so some of the concerns that some of the opposition parties have, for instance, about, well, it isn't a long-term relationship in terms of labour or environmental protection. We want to get a long-term relationship on that. Well, you'd be able to do that post-Brexit Day under an association agreement because you wouldn't have some kind of inherent time limit on the association agreement. So that would definitely change the possible dynamics of negotiation.